So now we're going to look at making our ring holder. So you'll have 4 pieces for this. You'll have a little strip of foam, the slightly wider panel, the narrower panel, and your little end tab. Now with my narrower panel, which is the 1-inch wide panel, what I've done on the reverse is I've drawn a line centrally down the middle, and then I've pressed both of the raw edges into the middle. I've used a tailor's clapper, which actually makes that nice and flat. Otherwise, if you've interfaced it, it tends to resist the fold a little bit and it doesn't stay nice and flat. You could, if you wanted to, leave the interfacing off of this, but I just find I like to add the interfacing because it does give a little bit of stability to the ring holder. You don't want it being all floppy and bendy. So we're going to take our bigger part and we're going to just add, I'm just going to mark a line that's 1/2 inch away from one end. On the wrong side, and I'm just going to lay my piece of foam so that the short end touches that 1/2 inch mark I've made. That doesn't look long enough. Is it long enough? No, it is long enough. It just didn't look long enough for a moment there. So in which case this might be too long. No, it's all right. It's me. I'm just imagining it differently. Now, what you can do is you can either use a bit of double-sided tape. I tend to avoid double-sided tape because I make such an awful mess with it. But you can just pop a little bit of glue just to kind of hold it in place. You could even use a glue stick if you preferred. So that's just, my glue's gone a bit thick. It does after a while, doesn't it? So I'm just going to position it pretty much centrally. And then I'm going to fold the outside edges around the foam. Now again, if you wanted to use a bit of glue stick or a bit of fabric glue, you could do. I'll use a glue stick because that's what I happen to have, if I can get the top off. You can do if you want to. You don't have to. And on the first couple of these I've made, I didn't do anything. I just literally just folded it and clipped it. It's very much a personal preference. It depends how confident you feel just folding. Now you're not going to be over folding, so you're not squishing the foam out of shape. You're just folding this fabric around on both sides. You will have a raw edge showing. That's exactly as it should be. So you can see I've just folded that fabric around that panel. I'm just going to pop a clip on. Now how far it overlaps will depend on how thick your foam is. I'm using a 3mm headliner scrim foam here because it's a scrap really, and that's what I happen to have a scrap of. You could even do this without the foam if you really wanted to, but I think the foam just gives it stops the rings when they're on there, stops the rings sliding up and down too much, unless you've got really huge fingers. So I've just literally folded that over and clipped it. I'm going to take this shorter piece, the narrower piece that I've created, and I've folded the edges in, and I'm going to lay that on that side where that fold is, where that piece of that raw edge is, and it will cover the raw edge, matching up the short ends. And I'm just going to take the clips off as I do that. And as I'm laying it on, you can see it's sitting centrally and it covers all those raw edges. Now I'm going to stitch down both sides of that the narrower panel, just to hold it in place. If you turn the machine on, it helps though. And I'm stitching an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance away from the very edge of that narrow panel. Same thing on the other side, again an 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the narrower panel. Trim off my thread ends, and our ring holder is now completed. Well, that part is. We're now going to take our little tab, and the end that you had your 1/2 inch, where you made your mark that was 1/2 inch, you're not going to be using that end, you're going to go to the other end. Now, if you've got a slight overlap there, just clearly I didn't measure that terribly well, and you're going to fold this in half and slot it over the end of your ring connector. Now, you may wish to add a little bit of glue just to kind of hold it in place as you stitch. Again, it's a personal preference. I tend to get a bit mucky with glue. You want it folded evenly. Now, it may well be just slightly wider than the ring holder. I've made this tab just a little bit wider simply because it will depend on how thick your foam is as to how wide this ends up being. So this tab is 3/4 of an inch wide, which should accommodate pretty much all of the foam thicknesses that you can get. I'm just going to pop a little clip on there, and you can see there that that's been folded over the end. It is slightly thicker, slightly wider, and that's fine. I can trim off any excess. And for me, that's just a tiny bit, not a lot. And it literally is just a sliver that's come off. And now I'm going to stitch around that square of faux leather. Now, there's nowhere to hide your stitching here, so you will need to do one back stitch at the beginning and the end just to kind of secure your threads. And crank it if you feel you need to. It's not a big drama. Let's get rid of my thread ends, and if you've got any excess. Sometimes faux leather like this will stretch when you're doing very tiny little bits, and it sometimes moves a little bit, so just trim off any thread ends and any excess of that tab thread end. And there we have it. Now I'm going to pop a snap through here. Obviously I don't do that to camera simply because everybody's got different snaps, and because if I start banging with a hammer on my table, my phone goes doolally and everything falls off the table. So I'll go and pop my snap through there now, and you can use whichever snaps you want. If you are, however, using cam snaps, the little plastic cam snaps on this, there's quite a lot of layers to go through, so you may find that you need to use the ones with the longer threads, or you need to give this a good bash with a mallet just to flatten it down, because sometimes it's quite difficult to get a cam snap through, not to get it through but to fix it, especially if you're using hand tools. If you've got a tabletop press, you should find it easier. I'm using little metal spring clips on this because that's what I've got, and I like them. They look nice because they're silver, so they are a bit of bling. So I'm going to go and pop that on, and we'll come back to you with the next piece.